On behalf of the Conference Planning Committee, I would like to welcome you to the 2014 BC Library Conference. We're really glad you're here. My name is Baharak Yousefi, and I have the honor and pleasure of being this year's conference chair. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered this evening on unceded Indigenous land belonging to the Coast Salish peoples, including traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Our theme this year is Hello World. We chose this theme because it captured our feelings of optimism, engagement, and curiosity. It allowed us to communicate our enthusiasm about the world around us and our eagerness to learn from the experiences of others, both inside and outside of the library community. All this eagerness and enthusiasm also led us to try a couple of new things this year. We identified 5 program streams: access, community, evidence, place, and work, and we built the program around that. Thank you very much to the 2014 Conference Program Subcommittee for all their work and support of that. We actively curated sessions with speakers from fields whose interests and questions intersect with our own. We saw value in learning from their experiences and seeing through their eyes. We chose to put our money where our mouth is in 2 small but important ways. In lieu of traditional individual speaker gifts, we are making a lump sum donation to openmedia.ca this year. Thank you. And I'm also delighted to announce that we will be streaming and archiving the 3 keynote speakers, Ivan Coyote, Marian, Bantjes, and Arundhati Roy. Totally the best 3 keynote speakers in the world. I know. I'd like to thank our colleagues Ben Hyman and the BC Libraries Cooperative, Mark Jordan and Shirley Liu, who are providing support needed to make this happen. Also, I've been asked to ask you to please don't watch the live streaming while you're in the room right now. Okay. We are grateful to all the presenters, to the invited speakers, to the volunteers, and to the conference delegates. None of this would be possible without your contribution and generosity. Lastly, I would like to thank the members of the Conference Planning Committee, Annette DeFavre, Tara Robertson, Shirley Liu, Gwen Bird, Michael Burris, Jennifer O'Donnell, Ann Olson, Beth Davies, Erin Watkins, Kate Sloan, Ali Douglas, and Shannon Stump. Thank you. We hope that you will find the next 2 days inspiring, engaging, at times uncomfortable, and at other times blow your mind awesome. Now I would like to welcome to the stage the Executive Director of the Council of Prairie and Pacific University Libraries and BCLA President Gwen Bird to introduce our keynote. Gwen?
Hello and welcome everyone. It's my honor to introduce Ivan Coyote as our opening keynote speaker for the 2014 BC Libraries Conference. I'm sure that Ivan is already known to many of you as a beloved local writer, spoken word artist, and storyteller par excellence. Originally from Whitehorse, Ivan now lives and writes in Vancouver. Since 2000, they have been published by Arsenal Pulp Press, publishing 9 books during this time, including Bow Grip, The Slow Fix, Close to Spider-Man, and more recently, One in Every Crowd, a book for queer youth. In addition to teaching creative writing at Capilano University and doing writer-in-residence gigs at Carleton and Western universities and the Vancouver Public Library, among others, they have also released 3 CDs of storytelling with music since 2003. A believer in the transformative power of storytelling, Ivan also regularly speaks in schools, to social justice groups, and to seniors. As a longtime reader, admirer, and fan of their work, I feel particularly lucky to welcome Ivan here this evening. Please welcome Ivan Coyote.
Hi everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm a bit nervous. I've been telling stories for a long time, I can sometimes gauge the gravity of a gig I'm going to do by my mother's response. I said, I'm going to do a keynote at a conference that Arundhati Roy is speaking at. She said, "Oh, what are you going to wear?" I often get asked where I learned to tell a story. And the answer comes easy to me without reaching. My grandmother's kitchen table. I can picture it right now. All my memories appear in my head like circa 1975 Technicolor prints, with those rounded corners. Red rose tea in a chipped brown Betty teapot with Pacific evaporated canned milk and sugar cubes right out of the Rogers box on the burnt orange Formica countertop. Ashtrays brimming with smoked right to the filter Export A regulars and longer crumpled number 7 menthol butts marked with my grandmother's and auntie's lipstick. Molson Canadian and Old Stock, stubby beer bottles and rum and cokes, sometimes a rye and ginger on the rocks, if you wanted to get fancy with it. My uncles, I used to think this was so cool too. My uncles would tap the ash from their smokes right onto the thighs of their jeans and rub it in with calloused palms. The ladies would half listen to their kids complain about who punched who first or who wasn't sharing what, and then send them back outside to play ball hockey in the driveway. All of this under a halo of cigarette smoke. Oh, the good old days, right? The hockey game on the CBC in the living room. Always there were stories. Always a never-ending stream of stories, never-ending and overlapping, interrupting and arguing with each other stories. I was the oldest of my generation, and I would hang around the periphery, too old to play hide and seek anymore, but too young to have anything much to say, so I would just listen. This is how I learned my family history, our legends, and our lies. Tell us the one about how would you know? You weren't even there. You were too young to really remember, but that's not what happened at all. Don't listen to him. He's always been totally full of, oh my God, you remind me of your father when you do that. Remember that time? I do not recall now whose bright idea it was in the first place, but you are the spitting image. It sounds crazy, but it's true, and I swear to you, it runs in the family. Whenever anyone asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would say, an underwater biologist. I have no idea why. What I really wanted to be was just like my dad or my Uncle Rob, holding court at the kitchen table, punctuating their sentences with a wave or a stab of their cigarette, punchlines followed by long pulls on their drink, applause measured in decibels and table slaps, chapters marked by someone spilling something and someone rushing in with a wet tea towel before the tablecloth got ruined. I remember wanting to grow up and be that. Except that was not a job. It was just something that you did with your family until you had to get up and drag your ass back into work on Monday morning. Ironic, now, that the very same family that taught me everything I know about telling stories took so long to understand just what it is I actually do for a living. My grandmother, Flo, she once told me that a job wasn't really a job unless you hated it. That would be funnier to me now if that had not been the biggest truth in her life. And if that truth hadn't bent her back and blown out her knees and curled her arthritic fingertips back into her palms, like permanently. So I'm a storyteller. This is what I do for my job. And sometimes the reality of this astounds me, and I never, not once, stop feeling blessed. I always call my grandma Pat from the road, especially when I'm in a new city I've never been to before, and the conversation always goes something like this. She yells into the phone, like she doesn't quite trust the technology yet, but I won't do that because we're talking to the internet. But she says, "Where did you say you were?" And I answer her, "I'm in Berlin, or Saskatoon, or Yellowknife, or Winnipeg, or Sault Ste. Marie, or New York City. And what are you doing there?" She always asks. "I have a gig," I always tell her. A gig. For some reason, this word infuriates her. Then she will ask, "What do you mean? Like, you have a reading?" "Yeah," I say. "Sort of, like a reading, yeah." And this is always followed by the very same question. "Who pays for all this?" So this seems like a perfect time to thank the BC Librarians Association. Also like to specially thank Annette DeFavre, Baharak Yousefi, Shirley Liu, and Tara Robertson, especially, and all of you as well. Anyway, she always asks, "Who pays for all? They pay you to talk? You tell me, where do I sign up for that gig?" I never forget how lucky I am. Even when I drag my suitcase full of books back up 4 flights of stairs and fall onto the couch, dog-tired and road-sick and lonely, and the milk in the fridge all gone sour, I always, when I get home, I always listen to this one Farron record. Do you know Farron? Yeah. I love librarians. I put on that song, you know the one 15 years ago? I worked the line with 1,000 more, all doing time, while the foreman smiled, complicit crime. We were strangers to the plan, and an old woman ran the gears. She couldn't move. They said she'd been there 40 years. I think that's rude, because 40 years is 40 years, and I was only 15 then. And the work waged war upon our backs, and we gauged our steps, and we didn't look slack. And one day that old woman didn't come back. I couldn't work so well, and they let me go. But I don't forget about the factory. I don't expect this ride to always be, "Can I give you what you want to see? Will we do it one more time?" I listen to that song, and then I remember to always be grateful. Grateful to be here. Grateful that all of you are here with me. Because think about it. How could this even happen? I'm the opening keynote speaker at a conference for a bunch of smarty pants librarians. Think about it. Me. Tattooed, bicep, gender ambiguous, almost bastard sort of daughter of a welder. I grew up on an unpaved dead-end street in the Yukon. I have my grade 12 and my electrician's ticket. My uncles are mechanics and carpenters. My aunts are bookkeepers and telephone operators. My cousins are plumbers and strippers and house cleaners. How did I get here? There's only one reason. And that's because I can tell a good story. And the right story, told from the right heart, at the perfect time, that's a very powerful thing. So, let me tell you a story. Yeah? Somehow, by that magical perfect storm of bullshit and happenstance and economic necessity, beloved by all working artists, I found myself teaching a memoir class to senior citizens in a community college night school class a few years ago. And on the very first day of that class, I asked all of my students to briefly introduce themselves. And there were two women sitting inches apart from one another, right in the front row. One looking a little designer Chanel with pearls, the other looking a little more the Bay on scratch and save day, if you know what I mean. Both of them were in their mid to late 70s, I figured. It turned out one was German, the other one was Dutch. They had both grown up in Europe during the Second World War. And when the German woman introduced herself, the Dutch woman visibly recoiled, but immediately caught herself and regained her composure. But I had seen it. I was the only one who had seen it. Both of their faces were right there in front of mine. It was just a flash, but there it was. Unmistakable. Hatred, judgment, fear, maybe, even. The Dutch woman then did what women of her generation were taught so well to do with such unsightly feelings. She hid them. She tucked them neatly up the sleeve of her cardigan or stuffed them into her handbag to be disposed of later, privately. I could tell that what she really wanted to do was get up and move herself to another seat, far away from her memories of the German occupation of Holland. But alas, she had been brought up far too well to allow herself to indulge in such a display of bad manners. One of the assignments I gave that class was to pick a room from their childhood home and tell us a story of something that had happened in that room. It's a good assignment. You can steal it and use it if you want. My theory is that every room in a house lends itself to a different family of stories, yeah? Doorways are where people arrive and leave, and kitchens are often a place where women gather, where family secrets are passed down, recipes. Living rooms are where you often watch the news or hear about things. Hallways are transitional. Attics are for storage and memory. And basements are for secrets and for old discarded things. They're also where the machinations of the house are kept. Bedrooms are places for sex and for sleeping and sometimes for death. Bathrooms are places of solitude. In my family, the only place of solitude. The Dutch woman, she wrote a beautiful story about dancing to the radio in the front room of their house during the German occupation. Her family had been forced to pawn all the furniture in their house to buy food, but had held on to the radio because it was their sole source of news about the war. Because there was nowhere to sit down anymore, her mother had invented this little game, insisted that they all dance together in the front room after dinner instead. She told us about how they woke up one morning to discover that her best friend, who was Jewish, had disappeared in the night, along with her entire family, never to be heard from again. She wrote of peeking through the dust-streaked front window of that Jewish family's home and noting how they had left all their furniture behind, even though no one remained to sit on it. Then the German woman went next. She stood up and told us a story about how when she was 5 years old, the German army had shipped all of the young children out of Berlin to keep them safe from Allied bombs. Her and her 2 older brothers had been taken from their parents and evacuated by train into the countryside. Her mother had been promised by the soldier that her children would be kept and placed together in a safe home. But this was not the case. As soon as the front door of her parents' home was closed behind them, she was immediately separated from her brothers and spent 5 years completely alone, working as an unpaid servant of a rather cruel farmer. She wrote of having no home at all for the entire war and of sleeping on a bed of hay in the barn, spooning with litters of piglets for warmth and companionship. She had no contact with any of her family for this whole period and had even been told by the farmer's children that her family was probably dead. Both stories were so emotional and moving for the class to hear that we decided to take a small break. Luckily for all of us, a goodly portion of the class was over 70, so there were many travel packets of Kleenex in hand-knit covers, removed from handbags, distributed amongst the class. The Dutch woman reached her liver-spotted hand across the desk and clutched at the German woman's diamond-studded fingers. I had no idea that kind of thing happened to the German children as well. I'm sorry, it never even crossed my mind. The German woman, she shook her head, like she was trying to shake off the words of comfort too. Oh, she said, but we were on the wrong side of that war, were we not? We got only what we deserved. The Dutch woman let out this long burst of breath, and the tears escaped her eyes and flooded down her cheeks. She said, but you were only a child. How could you have possibly been anything but innocent? And I watched the 2 of them move toward each other and embrace. 60, nearly 70 years later, finally stripped of at least a little bit of their shame and guilt and fear and hate. Maybe a little bit. Just 2 old women hugging each other under the humming fluorescent lights in a kind of a tired old classroom in North Vancouver. So simple and so human, all because they had sat and listened to each other tell a story. And I have spent the better part now of 20 years dedicating myself to honing this craft of telling stories, listening to the stories of others. I have come to believe that storytelling is the single most powerful tool that we own. I see evidence of this everywhere I go, in the eyes and hearts and heads of the thousands of people storytelling brings into my life. It is so much harder to other someone when we have been given a chance to recognize glimpses of our own selves in the telling of someone else's story. Someone we thought was a perfect stranger, yeah? Someone we couldn't possibly have anything in common with. Stories are the most effective tool we have on hand for dismantling what is broken in our society and for building a better and more just framework for us all to live within. You cannot legislate compassion, especially not the Harper government. You cannot force someone to be kind. There are no laws that forbid ignorance. You cannot unlearn racism or homophobia or classism without first hearing a story that compels you to care about curing your apathy or addressing your intolerance. The only way to truly change the world, in my mind, is to better understand one another. And the best way to do this is to tell each other our stories and remember our own. And what is a library, really? But a giant warehouse full of stories. I've always thought that. So really, it's not much of a leap of reason to conclude that the quickest way to change the world is to build more libraries. Better fund and support the libraries we already have, right? And to keep filling them full of all kinds of stories. To commit ourselves to making these stories accessible to as many of us as is possible, with special attention to those who might most need these stories to survive. My beloved wife, Zina, was born and raised in the small, blue-collar town of Thunder Bay, Ontario, the only daughter of a single mother on welfare. Zina was an exceptional kid. Over there, but I won't look at her, else I will begin to cry.
Hi, Librarian.
She was an exceptional kid, and she has grown into a woman. She was awarded her PhD when she had just turned 30 years old. She is the Assistant Director of the Canadian Institute of Health Research, Institute of Gender. Yes, I did practice that. And she's just beginning. To say my wife is a capable and accomplished person would be the textbook of an understatement. But my rocket scientist wife, Zina, cannot ride a bicycle to this day. Something most of us took for granted. Something most of us learned to do when we were very little. Zina never had the opportunity to even try because her and her mother were always too poor to afford a luxury item like a bicycle. They were too busy heating a rented apartment and paying the bills. Ways, her mother, and even myself as well. But I have to go on much more about the power of books and knowledge to the lot of you. Now, do I? So let me tell you my own small town. My grandmother was, among other things, a bookbinder. She also worked at the Whitehorse Star, our local newspaper, operator. An ironic set of skilled trades for a woman who was close to illiterate to possess. I'm old enough that I remember the library in the very early 70s, waiting for my grandmother to finish work at the library. I'm old enough to recall the smell of glue and paste and that and twine and dust and paper that hung around in the musty air in the little back room where she repaired library books. And I remember my grandmother's trade-learned respect for books. She taught us to make book covers out of brown paper grocery bags and masking tape for our school books. She would deliver a sound slap to the, she's dead now, so you don't have to call children's services, because good luck finding her. She would deliver a sound slap to the back of your head if she caught you putting an open book face down on a bedside place, and folding over the corner of a page was a nearly cardinal sin in her book, if you'll pardon the kind of clumsy pun. She also found it sinful to write or mark or highlight any line of text in any book, textbook or not. I have now published 10 books of my own, a fact she would no doubt be fiercely proud of, were she still alive to mark this achievement with me today. And even 10 books in, a silent cringe curl inside me every time I sign a book for someone. It's true. Just way back in my head. Thank you very much. In the back of my head, I can't help but imagine her shaking her head sadly at me from somewhere, making an almost inaudible but still heart-sinking noise like that from her rocking chair in the clouds, writing my name in a perfectly that someone else has paid their hard-earned money for. Where did she go wrong? As soon as I got my own library card. I was a voracious reader, as were most of my family. I read everything I could, library books, my parents' entire bookshelf, including The Joy of Sex, Lady Chatterley's Lover, and at the time, the oh-so-racy Hotel New Hampshire. Remember that? Might be my root. Anyway, so I digress. I read books borrowed from my other grandmother's impressive home library on topics that range from palm reading to atheism to poetry written by watercolors. I excelled in my schoolwork, but I barely passed the grade when it came to discipline and deportment. In grade 5, I began what I would one day look back upon as my serious, visceral career as an anti-authoritarian. My grade 5 teacher, Mr. Rondeau, and I had such a dramatic daily clashes of opinion. His biggest sin in my mind was that he'd made this passing comment while we were reading Animal Farm about Russians being godless communists. And I had recently read Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, so I, of course, tried to engage him in a bit of a banter about the difference between true communism and state capitalism. And he wouldn't have it. He just shut me down for some reason. Anyway, halfway through February, he finally dragged me to the principal's office and announced that he was going to throttle me if I spent even one more minute mouthing off and disrupting his classroom. So our principal, he asked me to bring in all my notebooks, everything, my homework assignments for him to take a look at. He glanced through them all, fairly detailed. He noticed my pridefully neat workbooks, my meticulous math problems, decided that my schoolwork was not the issue. There was only one grade 5 class in our small elementary school, so transferring me to a different class was not an option. Skipping me a grade this late in the year was not possible either. So the principal rolled up his sleeves and he set to work, emptying out a storage closet across the hall from his office. It's a true story. He dragged one of those desk and chair combination things and an empty bookshelf into the tiny windowless room. He screwed a pencil sharpener onto the wall next to the door, and he declared this tiny little space my own personal office. He asked me, did I have a library card? I nodded emphatically, yes, I did. He got the secretary to secure a bus pass for me, and he wrote a letter to the librarian at the big main library downtown, excusing me from classes, and he asked me what I wanted to write a 5,000-word essay about. Spontaneous human combustion, I told him. He raised an eyebrow at me. And also sharks, I told him. And Caligula, the Roman guy. And space. Astronaut stuff, not Martians. And Bigfoot. He raised both eyebrows at me. Not all in one essay, I assured him. Different essays. Good start, he smiled. Report to me first thing every morning, and then go downtown to the library. Don't brag about this arrangement. I've only got the one storage closet here. So I spent most of the rest of grade 5, a few glorious months, at the library, reading whatever I pleased and writing about whatever I wanted. I did all of my math and science assignments sitting in my little office. I went to regular gym class on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and then I bolted to the bus stop as soon as I could manage. I knew the librarian. She had worked there since forever. She was a friend of my grandmother's. So at first, I was suspicious. I worried that she would tell my gran about whatever books I was reading. So I played it very safe for the first few weeks. I even feigned interest in reading the Bible. Since it seemed very holy, I thought it would look good on me, being kind of kicked out of grade 5 as I was. It might show my attempts at behaving myself. After a couple of weeks, I took a chance and I pulled from the shelves, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret." And I read it right there in the library, in a cozy chair tucked into a back corner. I was afraid to check it out and bring it home. And one late afternoon, the librarian found me sleeping with it in my lap. And I didn't know then what I know now about librarians. "Just take it out and bring it home," she told me, after she shook my sneakered foot to wake me up. "What you or anyone else reads is private. It's kind of like confession." Once I figured out there was a library code of secrecy, I smuggled home and reread all the dirty bits of Clan of the Cave Bear, the entire Flowers in the Attic series. My grandmother's brown paper book wrappers came in very handy. It was a liberating time. So I can basically thank that librarian for keeping me in school that year, and for keeping me in poorly written smut, and for showing me the never-ending wonder to be found in the card catalog. Oh, the good old days. In 2009, I had the very great honor of being selected to be the Vancouver Public Library's writer-in-residence. It was during my 5 months working in my little room on the 3rd floor that I got to see just what being a librarian in the heart of a big urban center really entails. As you know, duties include, of course, librarianing, shipping and receiving, warehouse operations manager, substance abuse counselor, mental health advocate, babysitter, early childhood educator, security guard, mentor, bouncer, custodian, hall monitor, homeless support worker, tour guide, guidance counselor, technical skills gap facilitator, Band-Aid, paperclip, and assorted office supplies distributor, historian, and of course, storyteller. All of these duties and responsibilities always performed with not just professionalism, but even more important than that, patience and compassion for all. Because that is the thing, right? The most important and never to be forgotten thing. Libraries are for everyone. Wheelchair accessible, with accessible bathrooms, free to the public. Public meaning the actual definition of public, which is by the people, for all of the people. And what you read or look up or take out is protected and private. A librarian will help you figure out which book you need, locate it, and put it in your hands. I found out during my earliest dabbles into the world of queer publishing via the Little Sisters Bookstore versus Canada Customs fiasco that the biggest and most organized anti-censorship force we have in this country, and even on this continent, is actually made up of librarians. And this is no small thing in these times and under this federal government. For me, as a queer and trans person, this is not to be taken lightly and never to be taken for granted. I know that given the chance, our hard-fought and won rights and resources as women, as queer people, as trans people, as sexual minorities can be rolled back or removed or revoked or ignored or defunded by the right-wing powers that be. I also know that one sure way to control a people is to control the information they have access to, the books that they read, and the books that they share. So I guess we should add freedom fighter to the list of tasks regularly, quietly performed by librarians. I know that we have the internet now, and that connects all of us in ways I never could have imagined in the back corner of the Whitehorse Library on 2nd Avenue in early April of 1979. But I also know that there are thousands of little kids in other towns all across this country who still need a librarian to place the perfect book in their lonely hands and tell them it is okay to read it, that in fact, reading this book is a fine thing, an excellent thing. How do I know that for sure? Because I get emails magically and instantly from those kids nearly every day. Kids all across the country who got my book because a librarian handed it to them. I come from a family of autodidacts, a blue-collar bunch who read for enjoyment, for release, for relaxation, sometimes even to learn. Hard work was an escape from hardship, and books were an escape from work. My wife escaped a kind of poverty I have never known through reading, and her book learning allowed her to leave that poverty behind forever. Our families lived on opposite ends of this huge country, but both of us learned the very same lesson very early. Books are magic. Books are sacred. They are to be cherished and kept safe. Books are full of stories. Stories can change the world. And libraries are full of books. Ergo, libraries are full of magic. Libraries are sacred. They are to be cherished and kept safe, because libraries can change the world. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. I hope you, thanks a lot. I hope you have a fantastic conference and a really great time. And thanks for everybody for coming out tonight. Take care.
I'm awash with pride. Thank you, Ivan. On behalf of the BC Library Association, thank you. I'm pleased to let you all know that you can get more of this. Ivan's books, full of magic and stories that will compel you to care, will be for sale just outside the room in the foyer, including a brand new book, Gender Failure, which is, this is the world premiere, in fact. This is the first time this book has been available for sale. And thanks to the People's Co-op Bookstore, who is out there at the table selling those books. Ivan will also be upstairs signing books in the Harborside Ballroom, where we're going to move upstairs for a reception. And at this time, I would like to present this to you, Ivan, on behalf of the BC Library Association.
Thank you.
Thank you.